Hey everybody, it's Angela, and today I am not going to do a crafty video, but I am going to video how I make sourdough bread. And I have my own wheat grinder, and so I like to use a combination of different wheats. You have to use ones that have the gluten in them, so a good one for that is either a hard red or hard white. And so I use hard white here, is what I'm going to use today. I'm also going to use some rye and some hulled barley. And it's going to be the ratio about 1/2 hard white and 1/4 rye and 1/4 hulled barley. And so I'm going to get those together and get my flour ground. Okay, what I've got is a Retzel millwright wheat grinder. And it has steel burrs on it instead of stones at the moment, but they supply either kind. And you just pour your grain into the top of the grinder. That was my hard white. Do some rye, and I don't use measurements. You can always put more in and grind some more if you need more. It doesn't have to be precise. Bread's very forgiving, I've found out. It's hard to mess it up. Okay, so after you have all your hard white, rye, and whole barley in there, I just kind of mix it up in the hopper before I turn it on, people. Don't put your fingers in there when the hopper's running. And then I have a container, and I will start this going, then I'll move the camera so that you can see it. Okay, so all my wheat is done grinding, and I can turn that off. It is somewhat noisy, but I have found that the Retzel mill, and that's spelled R-E-T-S-E-L, is by far the best grain mill that I've used, and I've used a couple. And you can see on the left there's another grinder that's actually a bigger grinder that's made by Retzel that I have actual stones in at the moment. But the small millwright works great, and I have the steel burrs in it because the steel burrs can grind a larger variety of grains. It can grind soft white wheat, and you don't really want to grind soft white with stones because it will gum up the stones and kind of clog it up. So the steel burrs, you know, just do a wider variety. And I have quite a few different seeds and grains that I use, so I just leave the steel burrs on that machine just for ease of use. So it does take, you know, a few minutes to grind up your flour, and you can just do, you know, other things while you're waiting for that to get finished. And this is what you wind up with, and it's a really nice flour. Now, it's not going to be as fine as what you would buy in the store. It's just a little bit coarser, and that's because it's the whole grain. The flour that you buy from the store, they've removed a lot of the grain from it in order to make it store longer and you know, ship to your local store and sit on the shelf. And this is the whole grain, which has all the nutrition in it. And after you've ground it, you should use it within about 7 days, because after about 7 days, the oils in the grain are going to start going rancid. So that's why I like to grind it right before I use it. And that's the reason the stores remove so much of the goodness of the grain, is because it'll go rancid sitting on the shelf. So they have to remove all that. And so once you get this, you can go ahead and get your sourdough, and let me get that ready and I'll show you how I do it. Okay, so I just use a big stainless bowl here, and this is my sourdough starter, and I've stirred it down, but I have not fed it yet. You don't want to feed it because that's going to, you know, dilute the starter, and you want all the enzymes and yeast that are in there, all your bugs. And you use a cup of your starter. Now my starter, I keep it a little thinner than some people do. If you find that your dough is too dry, then you can just add a little more water later. So I'll show you what the consistencies can look like. And like I said, this is very forgiving. So you just want to use a cup of starter, and then after I put my starter in, then I go ahead and feed the mother sponge. And I use just a regular King Arthur or store-bought flour for feeding my sponge. Now you can use your fresh ground flour. You just have to be cognizant of the fact that, you know, there's other yeasts and stuff on the grain, so you might wind up with a little bit different culture as you try different grains in your starter. So I like, in this regard, to use the store-bought flour because it's, you know, has less other contaminants, I guess is a good word to use. And you just put a little bit of flour in there and a little bit of water and stir up your mother sponge, and then she'll be good to go next time you make bread or waffles or anything you want to do with sourdough starter. And I don't refrigerate this one. I pretty much bake all of our bread, so I'm using it quite consistently. So I feed it, you know, every other day, whether I use it or not. I feed it and just leave it out on the counter in a warm spot. And so here's what it looks like after I've just fed it. And that's about the consistency of my mother sponge. So now I'll just cover it up, and I usually keep it in this plastic container, and I've used a container that is BPA free. It also was brand new when I started using it, so there were no scratches or contaminants on the inside of the plastic when I started doing this. And it also has a little vent in the top, so when I just feed it, you know, you might want to just leave the vent open so that the air, you know, can get in there for the yeast to work. So after you've taken care of your mother sponge, you've got a cup of starter in your bowl. You want to add 2 cups of warm water, and we're going to do this in kind of 2 waves because it's easier to mix that way. So 1 cup of starter, 2 cups of warm water, and then 3 cups of the fresh ground flour. And we're going to mix it, and we'll be adding more here later, but it's easier just to do it in 2 parts or 2 waves of work because it incorporates a little better this way. And you'll see it's very very wet, and the dough the whole time will be a little more wet than probably what a lot of people do. Again, this isn't the only way to do it. This is just the way that I do it. So you get that mixed up, and then you're going to want 1 more cup of warm water and some more flour. And let me go get my water, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I've got our 3rd cup of warm water, and at this point I'm going to add the only other ingredient you need to add. You don't have to, but that's about 2 teaspoons of salt. And I have forgotten to put the salt in there before, and it goes just fine. It's just that it's really sticky and hard to work with. The salt actually helps retard how fast the dough expands and makes it a little easier to work with. And plus it does add, you know, flavor to the bread. So you put 2 teaspoons of salt, and then you don't have to, but I'm going to add a little bit of dry yeast, about a teaspoon, and that's only because I'm going to do this the same day. I'm going to bake this the same day that I'm preparing it. If I was to prepare this bread at night, I could leave it to rise overnight, and it would give the yeast plenty of time, the sourdough plenty of time to work overnight. But because I want to bake this later today, I'm going to speed up the process by adding a little bit of yeast. But again, you don't have to. So I'm going to stir that up. And that way it's really easy to get the salt and the yeast incorporated in there because it's pretty watery at this point. And then we're going to add 3 more cups of flour. It looks like I'm going to be just a little bit shy, and instead of grinding more, just for the sake of time, I'm going to supplement that with a tiny bit of white flour. I'm not a purist, but I'm just trying to make the overall product here a little bit healthier. And actually, if you're not used to eating whole wheat bread, if your family's not used to it, and they really like the poofy, white bread that you get in the store, you could use like half fresh ground flour and half bread flour from the store, and that'll give you a little bit lighter density loaf and a little fluffier, more like what your family might be used to as you kind of start getting them used to a denser, heartier bread. But my family just really loves the dense, hearty bread. Something about the whole grain just makes you feel full and satisfied. You don't usually overeat it. You can make your toast in the morning, put a little honey on it, or jam, and you're good for until afternoon. So, and then at this point, if you want to, you can add some other seeds. I think I am going to add a little bit of millet into this bread, make it a little different. I'm going to take about, not quite a quarter cup of millet and just stir that into the mix. You can add millet and seeds in with your grain. You could add, when you grind it, lentils, oats. I'll show you here in a little bit the selection that I work with. But essentially, this is all you do, and the first part of work is done. We'll let this rise, and this is my consistency. Again, it's a pretty wet dough. You don't knead it. At this point, you don't have to do anything. Just get it nicely mixed. And just scrape this off. And this is all I'm going to do to it for right now, except cover it with a little bit of plastic wrap. The plastic wrap helps keep the dough from drying out. We want it to stay moist and not get a hard crust on it. If you don't have plastic wrap, you can spray a little bit of cooking oil on it, or brush a little bit of oil if you don't have a spray, but just something to keep the dough moist so that it won't dry out. And then I'm going to leave this for a couple hours, and it's going to rise until it's about double in size. And I'll let you know exactly what the timing is when we get there. But I'll take a moment just to show you the different grains and things that I have on hand. Okay, so these are the different grains and seeds that I use when I'm baking. I've got a hard red and a soft white. Then the hard white rye and hulled barley that we're using for this bread. You can also grind in lentils into your bread, and that adds a little extra protein. You can add sorghum to your bread, and then these black ones here are chia seeds. Those can be added as well. You might want to put a little more water in your dough because the chia seeds will expand quite a bit and use up some of that water. Other things that I use in bread are the camelina or the amaranth seeds. Also have the farro or emmer grain. Buckwheat is a good one to add to a bread for a little bit different flavor. I love adding it to like even zucchini bread and stuff like that because it has a really nutty flavor. Then there's also sesame seeds, some yellow split peas that can be added. I've also got some spelt down here, and the spelt and like the farro, they don't have as much gluten along with the soft white. So I don't use those as much in breads that are going to rise, but they're great for biscuits, for pie crusts, for pasta and things like that you don't need them to really rise, or you're going to use something like baking powder or baking soda to get it to rise. And I've also got some einkorn, some whole oats, sometimes that I'll throw in there and grind up. So you can really change, and I use this exact same recipe. I just grind different things, and so you can change the same recipe up a lot of different ways just by being able to grind your own wheat and seeds into the bread. So, you know, with this, I can pretty much make any kind of pasta and pie crust and biscuit that I need to, and I just have fun playing with it, and we love eating these whole grains. So this is the selection that I usually use. Okay, so it's been a little over 3 hours, and this is what my dough looks like now. It's risen quite a bit. It's about double. It took a little longer for this to rise for me because it's about 68 degrees in here. It's a little cold outside. It's about 64, and it's been snowing for the past couple days. So where you're at, if the temperature in your home and your kitchen is higher, it'll probably rise faster. But essentially you want it to about double in size and get nice and poofy like this. So now we're going to knead it and punch it down for its second rise. So what I'm going to do is just put a little flour along the edge. And then get some ready. And I'm going to take the dough from the side, and that lets the flour kind of fall down in here to the bottom. And put a little on top. Now we're just going to knead this down, and I just knead it right here in the bowl because it, you know, I mean, I make bread a lot, and so I'm trying to make it easy and with the least amount of mess as possible so that, you know, I actually do it enough. So if it wasn't easy and, you know, relatively clean to do, I probably wouldn't do it enough, but I don't buy any bread from the store anymore. I pretty much make all of ours, so and you're just going to keep putting a little bit of flour on here just to keep your hand and stuff from sticking. We're not trying to add any certain amount of flour or anything. And here it's still sticking on the bottom quite a bit, so I'm going to put a little more. This way you can kind of see it and see the consistency. I know I watched a lot of YouTube videos on bread making, and I really appreciated the people who put them out there. So my family has been interested in how I make this bread, and people have been interested in, you know, grinding their own wheat and stuff. So just thought I would make this video. Tiny bit more. We're almost done. It's still a little bit too sticky. I'm going to put just a little bit more flour on there. Knead it just a little bit longer, but we're almost there. Okay, I am going to call this done. What I do next is I just take a little bit of cooking spray, spray it into, I have another bowl like this, and that'll keep our bread dough from sticking to this second thing, because as you can see, it's a pretty wet dough. And I just kind of roll it around in there to coat all the sides, and I'm going to cover this again, and we're going to let it rise some more, and I'll show you what it looks like. This will be faster, probably about an hour. I'm going to start dinner, so I gotta kind of shuffle things around here. A helpful hint is that if you have a bowl like this that you've done bread in, wash it out now, because this stuff becomes like concrete if you leave it to dry. And a wonderful tip I got from a YouTube user that put out, and I don't know their name, or I'd give them credit, but old, like your old AAA card or these junk mail cards that come in the mail, the ones that are plastic, make great scrapers. So when you're washing this bowl and you're scraping off, you know, when you have water in there too, these scrapers just really work good for scraping the inside of your bowl. So a little helpful hint, and I'll come back when I'm ready to shape the dough into the loaves and get them in the oven. Okay, so it's been just a little bit over an hour. And this is how my dough looks now. It's nice and raised up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my oven to 425 degrees. And then I'm also going to put this glass pie dish with some water in it, and I'm going to put that on the very bottom rack in my oven, and that's going to create steam in the oven, and the steam will help the bread dough stay somewhat moist so that it can rise as much as possible before it hardens off on the top. So while the oven's preheating, I'm going to go ahead and shape the loaves. here. I'm going to cut it roughly in half. I'm just going to fold one end over the other, then kind of tuck the sides up and flip it over. And then I'm just going to kind of turn the dough until it gets a nice tight top on it, and any kind of tucks are in the bottom. Those are our 2 loaves. I'm going to get a pan and I will be right back. Okay, so I got my pan. I use an old pizza pan that I've had forever, but you could use a cookie sheet, you could use 2 small pizza pans, you know, whatever, and you just put them on there, just something flat that you can set them on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait until the oven gets up to its preheated amount, and then I'm going to slit the tops and put a glaze on it. So let's just wait for the oven to finish preheating. Okay, my oven's almost up to temp now, so I'm going to make an egg wash. And I'm just going to use the egg white, not the yolk. And if you want, sometimes I add just a tiny bit of water. Then you want to take a sharp knife or a razor blade, and you just want to make some slits just to let that expand while it's in the oven. You could use a brush to brush on your egg white. I just get her done. Like I said, I do all the bread for my family, so whatever makes this go faster, the better. And now that those are formed, I'm just going to pop this into the oven for about 30 minutes at 425 degrees. Okay, so it's been a half an hour at 425. Let's bring these out. And here are the 2 finished loaves. And you can see that it expanded while it was baking, and where the slits were, it expanded. And then you can also see the little bits of millet seed that are through here. And now I'll just put it on a wire rack to cool, and then I will cut into it and do a little bit of video of that once it's cool, so that you'll be able to see the inside of the loaf. Okay, so I've let the bread cool for a little bit, and now I'll go ahead and cut into it. And this is what the inside of it looks like. Like I said, it's a little bit denser bread than a regular white sourdough. Even though it's a sourdough and it has the rye in it, it's not a very sour sourdough, because I did this all in one day with the yeast. Now, if I were to leave it with the sourdough to let the sourdough do the work overnight, it would be more sour. Because I used a little bit of yeast in it and did it all in one day, it's got a much more mild flavor. And then the seeds, I don't know if you'll be able to see the millet seeds in there, will also give it a little bit nutty of flavor. So yeah, I mean, my family loves it because it is a little more mild and not too sour. It's great for toast in the morning, and also this holds together really well for sandwich bread, where some of the whole wheat breads tend to crumble a little more. This will stand up to be cut for sandwiches. So it's a really good all-purpose bread, and I just vary the recipe for using the different kinds of grains and seeds and stuff that I make into the flour. So anyhow, I hope that this was instructional, and if I've left anything out or anything, just leave me a comment below. And thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you later. Bye.